there's like paramedics and all these, EMS people in my room, and I'm laying on the floor, and I have both my arms are numb. So I went to the hospital and they sent me home. They shouldn't have sent me home. They should have kept me overnight. And so my husband takes me to the doctor, sets me up with the EKG, and he's like, you got 90 seconds to get to the ER. My husband was scared. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. They told my husband, you have to sign off on this. She needs open heart surgery. And he's looking at them like, I'm not signing off on that. They're like, she might bleed out.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LynchFit Podcast. I am co-host and producer Nick Skolnick, and I'm very happy to have you with us. Today, we'll be hearing the harrowing story of a woman who survived 4 separate heart attacks before the age of 45. Now, before you turn this off and think this video is not for you, let me stop you right there. She was in shape, she was eating right, she was by all accounts doing everything she should have been doing, yet she still fell victim to one of the biggest killers in the world of both men and women. It's an important story for all of us to hear to stay healthy, no matter what age we are. Let's get right to it. Daniela, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We're so thankful that you're willing to tell your story on camera.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share it.
You're here because you had 4 heart attacks at a very young age, which is really scary. Walk me through, before that first heart attack, what your lifestyle was like. Were you working out? Were you eating well? What was going on there?
I was 36 years old when I resigned from pharmaceutical sales. I resigned to stay home and raise my kids. I honestly, in hindsight, think that the stress of being a stay-at-home mom for me was like real, but I didn't know how to manage it, but I always worked out. So I would, sometimes I'd go to the gym in the morning and then I'd go back in the afternoon and bring the kids to gym daycare.
But what age did you start exercising? When you were a young kid?
When I was 18.
So you were always into health and fitness?
Yeah, I put on like 20 pounds during high school because I had a high school boyfriend and I'd eat dinner at home. Then I went to his house, ate dinner again, and I was starting to wear his jeans. So the boyfriend jeans was real trendy back then. I was wearing them. And my mom's like, what are you feeding her? He's like, nothing, she just ate dinner. Well, she already ate dinner. I came from a big Italian family. So that's when I started exercising. Like, I realized I put on 20 pounds in high school. I didn't like the way I felt, and I didn't like wearing my boyfriend's jeans. Sure. It was that simple. So I got into working out and watching my fat intake or whatever it was.
And that was pretty consistent through your 20s?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And then in my early 30s, I have 2 little kids, and I still continue to exercise. It's great for my mental well-being, physical well-being, emotionally, my marriage, all of it. Like, if I don't work out, I'm not really happy.
You're probably somebody who could agree with that, right? I know that you start shaking a little bit if you haven't worked out in a few days.
Yeah, man, you need it, You don't want to do it sometimes, but when you do it, God, you feel so good afterwards,
And so then I'm 36 years old. I'm resigned from pharmaceutical sales, and I'm home with 2 little kids that are a year apart, and the stress was just not something I noticed, but I was having some chest tightness at the gym, and I told one of the trainers there, I'm like, gosh, something like there's like a tightness in my chest, and I just thought it was stress or I was having a panic attack. I didn't really know. There's no heart disease on either side of my parents.
Danielle, let me just ask you, so was it different from like a soreness that you would get from training?
Oh yeah, very different than soreness.
If you could briefly
It was like a tightness, like a squeeze in my chest, like squeeze. It was like a squeeze of some type.
The upper pec muscle?
Yeah, and it happened a couple times, and then one night I remember it happening, and Paul's like, that's not normal. I'm like, I know, I just think it's stress or whatever I said. And then I worked out. It was May of 2011, and I said, I'm going to work out in the garage. And my husband's like, you have 20 minutes, because he had to go to work. And I literally got off the treadmill, went inside. I'm like, I don't feel good. And he's like 911, you don't feel good? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And he's like, oh my God. Like, he calls 911. They come to the house, and there's like paramedics and all these, EMS people in my room, and I'm laying on the floor, and I have both my arms are numb, and I'm feeling something in my, what is it called? The jugular, whatever?
Carotid artery?
Yeah, I think so. I was like, something weird here that I didn't even know.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
a carotid artery.
yeah. I was sweating, I was cold, hot, but then I remember them getting me on the bed and saying something about, they were giving me, there was like 4 things to do for someone having a heart attack. It's nitro, morphine, oxygen, and aspirin.
Aspirin, yeah, sure. Salicylic acid.
So I got the nitro and I got the aspirin and maybe the oxygen. But then when I was laying in my bed, I heard them. I kind of passed out because I wasn't in control and there's all these people around and I don't like not being in control. So I tried to like relax myself, but I must have like passed out. And then I heard morphine. I'm like, I don't want morphine. I remember not wanting morphine for some reason. And they were like, okay, but you should go to the hospital and get checked. So I went to the hospital and they sent me home. They shouldn't have sent me home. They should have kept me overnight. They sent me home.
So you think you went to the hospital and because you were young and fit,
Yeah.
they probably just
Yes,
said,
they
she's having
were-
gas pains, get her
yes,
out of here.
Pretty much.
Yeah, what did they say?
They diagnosed me with near syncope, which is fainting, which had nothing to do with my pain.
Did they call it a syncopal episode or no?
I don't know. I don't remember. It was near syncope that I got like sent home with. So I went home and then I went home and then I left and went to TJ Maxx and my friend saw me there and was like, you should feel good now. I was like, oh, I was just in the hospital because I didn't feel great. She's like, well, you should feel great now. You had fluids, right? I'm like, yeah, but I didn't feel great. But I went home and went about my next 10 days and it happened again, that I didn't feel good. And so my husband takes me to the doctor and the doctor is just a family doctor and he sets me up with the EKG and he's like, you got 90 seconds to get to the ER. The ER and his office are right next to each other. So I look at Paul, I'm like, his EKG machine's not working. I mean, I was a drug rep. I'm like a know-it-all, right? Like his EKG is not working. He's sending us to the hospital. We go to the hospital and that was the first, it was awful. I mean, I kept saying, like, I don't want to be here if this is my heart. I want to be at Norfolk General because that's a heart hospital. My husband was scared. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. The doctors are like, she's like, this isn't good. We're giving her nitro or whatever, and she's not responding to it. And I don't know, something's wrong. My ST elevation maybe. I'm like, well, 10 days ago is probably when I had a heart attack. I don't know because I'm not a doctor, but I do remember the cardiologist wanting to do a cath, right? Well, I didn't know it was invasive. I didn't know that being in the cath lab can be invasive because they're putting a needle in your groin and looking at your heart. Well, a woman's heart and a man's heart are different. So you shouldn't be using the same size like needle or whatever to look at a woman's heart. I'm not sure what happened during that cath, but I said, please don't cut me, to the cardiologist. I remember saying that to him and he goes, I'm not going to cut you. I'm just looking at your heart. And there was a lot of stress. Like my aunt had been diagnosed with cancer and I was up all night and I have 2 little kids and I'm worried about my aunt and like all these things. And now I get put into a cath lab. I don't remember the cath lab, which most people do remember the cath lab because you're not usually medicated. And I guess 4 days later, I wake up out of a medicinal coma.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so I went from the cath lab to the OR. So ER, cath lab, OR. They told my husband, you have to sign off on this. She needs open heart surgery. And he's looking at them like, I'm not signing off on that. They're like, she might bleed out. Like, he's like, my brother was with him. He's like, you don't have a choice. And he's like, oh my gosh, like.
Danielle, can I ask you something? Because I don't know if we touched on this. You talked about your boyfriend's genes and everything. But at this point, you're fit as can be.
Oh, I'm pretty fit, yeah. I mean,
Like,
I kind of work out twice a day. And I mean, I'm not as fit as I will want to be, like in my own head. But
because you're
yeah,
you're an
a little
overachiever.
crazy.
But
Yeah.
so, but like for the average person, like,
Yeah, they
this
would
is
never-
like they're scratching their head saying, no
Right,
way, no
right,
how,
right.
right? And you're saying that too, basically, like, nah.
Right.
And
no
again,
way.
you're in your late 30s at this point, right?
Yeah.
So you are not in the normal age
You're not a
range.
candidate
No.
for this at all.
No.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, like the first time they sent me home, I don't even remember, they wrote like that I don't remember what, something with yoga. I'm like, I don't do yoga. Like that is not one of the workouts I do, but
Right.
they just were like, they looked at me the first time, sent me home because I looked too fit. So they shouldn't have done that. Like, you don't send a patient home based on what they look like.
Right.
I mean,
But I'm sure it happens all
It
the
happens a lot
time
with women.
because, and I'm not trying to give anybody an out, doctors are stressed out,
Yes.
they're overworked, they work 24-hour shifts, which
Right.
are crazy, and these are the people who are tasked with keeping us alive. I don't know why that's the way it goes, but
Right.
this is what happens, and you get these outcomes
Yeah.
where people who need more attention get sent on their way
Yeah.
because someone came in with a gunshot wound, or
Right.
someone came in with something that's obvious and
Right.
immediate, and you have a serious problem,
Right.
and you get sent on your way.
Yeah.
Scary.
But also, it's very important, Nick and Daniela, is the people that are watching this that is like, this video is not for me. Well, it could be.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
look at you now, and how
Right.
old are you today?
50.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look like this at 50, I can imagine what you look like at 37, right? And so many people think, oh, a heart attack video, it's not for me. Because look, well, maybe you should listen.
Right.
And maybe you'll never be you, and let's hope.
Yeah,
But-
exactly. Hopefully it
Yes.
isn't for you,
Right,
but,
right.
But
arm yourself with as much information as
Right.
you can.
Yeah.
That way, if you ever get to this point,
Right. You know to go.
And
get
it could look
checked.
like a heart attack could look like this.
Yeah.
And no one would ever think it,
No.
even the person themselves.
And I was
So,
in shock.
so let's take it back one second. How did you end up in the coma? Like, how did you end up?
So they told my husband that I needed open heart surgery, that I had a 95% blockage in my main artery, and another blockage, like a smaller one. And so he was like, "Oh my gosh!" So they, I guess I was in a medicinal coma because they did the surgery, and actually only one bypass took, like one of the grafts took, not both of them. And then they put me in a medicinal coma, probably because to keep me like calm or whatever.
Yes,
I'm not
okay,
really sure
okay,
why, because I don't
okay.
think everybody is in a medicinal coma after having open heart surgery. I think when I was in the cath lab, I think I asked the surgeon, and he's like, "Yeah, you were like trying to get off the table." I was trying to get on, I know that they must have medicated me, but I was literally like, I don't need to be here. Like, I was probably really stressed because I knew I wasn't in control. So I was trying to like leave. Wow. And they were like, had to strap me down. And I'm sure it wasn't a pretty sight, And then I wake up 4 days later, and I wake up like from the coma, and I look, and I guess maybe they took me out of the coma at that point, and I look, and I'm all wired up, and I was like, I start bawling. I'm like, what the hell did they just do?
Well, you're going into shock at that
Yeah,
point. If
yeah,
you've been out of it for a few days
Right.
and that much has happened to you.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what happened? So I remember telling the nurses I want my husband in here. My husband comes in. I was like, call. I told him to call my friend Joe, who lives in Long Island. He was a PA that I called on for years. And he's like, I don't have his number. And I rolled out his phone number off the top of my head. And my husband thought I was on drugs. Like, there's no way she memorized that number. I'm like, oh no, I memorized that number. And he called him, and he's like, Joe, and he's like, I'm in the, the recovery room with Daniela, and she told me to call you. So I get out, I'm there for another 6 days, being monitored, being told that I'm lucky I'm alive by nurses. And I'm like, when was I almost dead?
Wow.
Like, it just didn't make sense.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then I went home to my babies, and recovery was tough. Like, I was mad. I was mad at my husband.
You were mad at
the
him for
doctor.
allowing them to do the surgery?
A little bit, yeah. I was,
So they do a full, for people watching this that don't know what a bypass.
I mean, they cut me from here to there. Like, I was like, couldn't they cut me a little lower? I'm a female. Like, cut me from here to there.
And they took the artery out of your leg to bypass. You had to bypass.
I'm not positive. No, I think you're right. I think they took it from my leg. So then I'm home, and, I'm just mad, and I don't understand, and I'm confused, and I'm scared, like all the emotions, right? Like mad, scared, glad I'm alive, but like, what's my life going to look like, right?
So much unknown.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns. And
Are you mad too because like you're eating healthy, you're being conscious of your weight and exercising twice a day, and you're like, shit.
right. What did I
hell?
do wrong?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine.
I was mad. I went to Disney, and I remember my kids wanted me to get a scooter because I was recovering still or whatever. I'm like, I'm not getting in a scooter.
Yeah,
I
Daniela
can
doesn't
walk.
do a scooter.
No. And I was mad at people in scooters because I'm like, why did I have this heart attack and not somebody else?
Right,
Like,
it's
why?
overweight, yeah, sure.
But what were the doctors telling you at this point?
That I
Did
had
they have a
congenital-
good idea of why this happened to you this early on?
They thought it was congenital heart disease, that it was like something that wasn't detected as a kid. I'm like, well, I have 17 aunts and uncles, and none of them have heart disease. So that didn't really make sense to me. Years later, so then I finally, like, I'm recovering, and I'm lucky I could walk from my front door to my driveway, right? That's part of my recovery. And my friend's dad built me a garden while I was in the hospital, and that was like so nice because I'd watch my garden grow, and it made like all the difference in my recovery to watch vegetables and tomatoes, and like me getting better and the garden growing was like something really important to me. And yeah, and so it took me years to accept what happened.
What do you mean by that?
Like I was like, there's no way. It took years. I was scared to die young and leave my kids. I was scared to like exercise again.
Right, but when you said it took you 3 years to accept it, what does that actually mean?
Well, like my friends
how do
were
you
like, "You're
not
lucky you're
accept-
alive." I'm like, they almost killed me. Like, we have
but
different.
How do you
views of-
accept it? Like, are you like in your mind like that didn't happen? I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
I didn't believe I had congenital heart disease. I didn't believe that, your brain, a doctor or a cardiologist in my neighborhood, his son is my cardiologist, very brilliant men, both of them. He told me, he's retired, but he said, your brain, he asked me what part of my brain, am I creative or am I, whatever, the other
Not
side.
creative?
I'm not creative. He asked me that. I'm not creative. I'm more of a doer, right? Like type A personality. He asked me that, and I was like, why is he asking that? He said, because your brain is attached to your heart. And I was like, oh. So I was like totally balls to the walls with craziness and didn't realize it. Like my life was just, I never said no to anyone. I always went and did things that, even when I was tired, like I never listened to my body.
You pushed yourself too hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And had for years probably.
For years, my whole life, not just years. Like that's how I was wired. And that is
Blessing and a curse.
yeah, a blessing and a curse. So I've slowed down. Like, okay, so, I recover from this, but I still for years don't talk about it. I have to go into the supermarket and I covered my scar. I was like embarrassed of it. I was like, how did they do this to me? Like a young, healthy human, and you just cut me open like a pig, like that's what I thought. That's how I felt. And the whole working out thing. So I did go back. I started working out with a trainer in his little gym.
How long after?
I think probably 6 months, whatever they told me, 6 months to a year. And then I was back and started lifting.
But are you not still at this point not allowed to take, because you mentioned you weren't allowed to take spin class? Like
I think that they said, oh, that was after my other heart attack, that I wouldn't be teaching spin or taking spin classes.
Okay, because they want your
But
heart rate too high.
They
It
don't want my
wasn't
heart rate too
spinning
high.
per se. It was
Yeah,
the
it was
jacked up
just-
heart rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think I took spin. No, I did. I did spin. Years later, I got certified to spin. So I got over my heart stuff and was like, you know what? I'm going to teach spin. I didn't have heart issues. I went to St. Francis. I went to Columbia. I went to Stony Brook. I went to all the hospitals in New York.
Okay.
And I felt like, okay, I'm good. They told me my arteries were like a 16-year-old at Stony Brook, that my blood flow was awesome.
Well, hold on. I think we're getting too far ahead of ourselves here,
maybe.
right? Because that's how many years later?
No, like a year. Within a year of having my heart attack, I go, and as soon as I was like better, I wanted to go to Stony Brook. I think that was the first one that I went to, and the radiologist looked at my arteries and was like, "Your arteries are good." Like, they thought it looked like a dissection, which means that maybe my artery was perfed. We don't know for sure. That maybe when they went into the cath lab, they perfed my artery, and that caused me to go into surgery. Or that I was spasming and my artery tightened up and looked like a blockage, but it was actually not open. So when they went into the cath to put like the dyes in, it was tight and it looked like a blockage. So that I learned over the last 14 years, 13 years.
So you actually don't know if it was a blockage or if it was that tightening,
Right.
even still to
Right.
this day.
Right. I think
So the
it was
bypass could have been not supposed to happen?
possibly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what I had was called spontaneous coronary artery dissection. It's very common in women with young kids. I don't know why, but that's what it sounds like to me that I had, which makes more sense, and even the doctor.
And is that from stress?
It could be stress. It could be. Like, it's almost, I don't understand a lot about it.
Sure.
But it happens a lot in females. So, and women's number one killer is heart disease, not breast cancer, which is crazy because you don't hear that. You hear breast cancer. Anyway, so I got better and better by knowing that these doctors are like, it looks like a dissection, but your blood flow is good and blah, blah, blah. So I get certified in spin 3 years after my first heart attack. Life goes on, right?
And you're starting to feel like you're back to normal at this point?
Yeah.
You're working out, you're doing your mom thing.
No more chest tightness?
No more chest
Okay.
tightness at
Okay.
all.
So you're not symptomatic at all?
No.
Okay.
And I get certified and I'm teaching a spin class. This is in 2016, so 5 years later. Well, 3 years later I get certified. For 2 years I'm teaching spin. And I go to spin, and the owner of the gym was like, I'm so glad that I called you because you didn't realize you were on the schedule. And I was like, she's like, do you want me to get a sub? And I was like, no, I'm coming in. And I didn't feel great. And thank God I went, because I probably would have dropped dead in my house.
And you were by yourself?
At home?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was by myself. And she called, and I don't remember that
What
part.
does not feeling great feel like this time?
I don't know. I don't know what it was that I didn't feel great, but I was like, no, I'm coming. I'm teaching.
Chest tightness or
no? No, not at all. I don't know.
Like you're getting sick or something? Or just
I just didn't
weird
feel,
exhaustion?
I don't know. I
Felt
didn't feel,
off.
Yeah, it was just off. But
Because there's signs sometimes that people ignore when they're going to have a heart attack. Like sometimes, let's say you didn't eat out and you prepared your own food and you know it was good food, right? Like, and it's not like if you just get like weirdly like nauseous and you get vomiting or diarrhea, this sometimes could be you're having a heart attack. So that's why I was curious what not feeling good, did it feel different? Or was it like, I felt like I was getting a cold?
I don't remember before
Okay.
going to this
Yeah,
class. I know I drank a glass of wine the night before, and I wasn't hydrated. I know that. I didn't drink enough water back in the day, sometimes. So I went to spin, got on the bike, looked at the time. It was 9:25.
But you're going to the gym and you're saying, I don't feel, something's a little off?
I don't know. Maybe I woke up late. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
But you didn't feel so bad that you wanted to call in and say, I'm not coming. You're saying, I'm going to push through. I'm going to do this.
Yeah,
It's
because the first time, right, she said to her husband, we need to go to the
Right,
hospital. So it wasn't like that,
no.
right? Okay.
Mm-mm. But then I got on the bike and I look at the clock because I start my class at 9:35. And it's like 9:31 or something, and my legs got heavy, like really heavy. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do this for an hour. And then I look at the clock. I looked at the clock, whatever, it said like 9:31. But I look at the back of the room, and the room moved.
Oh, shit.
And that was it. And then I was down. I like slouched off my bike. I didn't fall off the bike like in I Feel Pretty when Amy Schumer falls off the bike in a spin class and she like bangs her head.
Okay.
Oh, you gotta watch. Well, I must have slouched out of the bike because no one saw me.
And at this
fall.
point, students are in there preparing for
yeah,
the class,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
people see this happen.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm not on the bike, and then I remember getting up, like looking up, and there was a fireman. His name's, I won't say his name. I guess I can. I mean, he like saved my life, right?
Sure, give him a shout out.
Mike Smith.
Thanks, Mike.
Nice,
Yeah,
Mike.
Thank you, Mike. So he came down from the second floor because he was whatever, like, he could do CPR and use the defibrillator. And he thought it was going to be like an older woman, and it was me. And he was just shocked. And then he saw my scar when he was shocking me back. And it was a legitimate shock because those things don't just shock you back unless you need to be shocked. Yeah. And then I came back. And I was like, I'm going to Norfolk General this time. I'm not going to the hospital, the first hospital.
Make me a drink, Nick.
Seriously, that is crazy.
Yeah.
So, and again, just to say it, if you had stayed home that
I could have
day
been dead.
and no one was there to give you that shock,
Yep, I
you
might have
might not
died.
be here today
Right,
telling
right,
your story.
Right. It's
I would
actually,
assume you wouldn't be. If you were by yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I don't know if it would have happened, but I didn't. It wasn't like I had my
because you were
heart
on the
rate up. Yeah, but I didn't do
How
anything
deep were
yet.
you into the
Nothing.
class?
I wasn't. It was the warm up. I was just.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
So
I
you
was just
weren't under a load.
No,
Your heart rate wasn't
no,
jacked up.
Not
yet.
at all.
Okay.
Not at all. But I do remember my water bottle was on like the whatever, the platform, but it wasn't on my bike, and I'm like, darn, my water's not on the bike. I do remember thinking that.
Okay.
So I think I was dehydrated.
Okay.
And my electrical part of the heart is a big problem.
Okay.
But I didn't know that at the time. Nobody ever said I had electrical issues. I had plumbing issues, right? Arteries.
Yep.
Not electrical.
Yeah, so let me just say for anybody watching this, in regards to heart, we have two things, what you said. We have the arteries, the plumbing, and then we have the electrical system.
Yeah.
And both are separate issues that
Yeah.
can happen. And some people have both, unfortunately.
Right.
But go ahead, Danielle.
So I leave the gym on a gurney, and I'm like, my cardiologist is called immediately. I think I might have texted him or called him. I was like, and I had to go to the closest hospital first, but then they transported me to Norfolk General, which is a heart hospital. And I get there and I'm like, feeling okay, like wondering what's going on. And then I'm told that I need a defibrillator. And I was like, what? They're like, you need a defibrillator. I'm like, what do you mean a defibrillator? Like, can I wear this thing, like, and take it off? They're like, yeah, you could wear a life vest. Do you know what a life vest is?
I do not, other than going on a boat and so you don't drown.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that. So I was like, all right, well, okay, I'll get a life vest. They're like,
Wait, so what is a life vest?
it's like a jacket that
Yeah.
you wear under your clothes.
At
it's like
all
a
times?
bra, but it's like a jacket, and it's got all these wires, and then this big battery pack that I got to
Jesus.
walk around with. And I'll wear that for like 3 months to see if I need a actual internal defibrillator, because at this point my ejection fraction is real low. It's like 25%. It's supposed to be 55 to 70%. That's your EF is like 55 to 70. Mine was 25. So I'm like,
Wow.
I mean, people walk with 25 all the time, but at my age, that's not the norm.
Right.
And my personality, that's not going to do well,
Right.
So I was like, well, I'd rather wear the vest. They're like, well, if you wear the vest, there's no guarantee that when you need a defibrillator, you're going to get it, because I don't remember why, insurance purposes, right? So now I'm going to wear the vest, and then I'm going to need a defibrillator. I might wait 6 months for the defibrillator. I could drop dead, right? So they're like, they convinced me that
Their
I needed.
thing, and just go for it.
Yeah, go for it. I was like, okay. So
Which again is another invasive surgery.
It is and it is. No, it's not really invasive. Like the one I have is called an SICD. It's a subcutaneous defibrillator. The leads don't go directly in my heart. There's a lead right here. I think you could see it, right? It's like a wire. It doesn't go. The leads don't go directly in my heart. They go into the device, which is on my side, and it's like a brain. It tells my doctors what's going on, if I have any irregular heartbeats or rhythm or whatever. But it'll shock me back into rhythm. It's not a pacer.
Okay.
So I get this big hockey puck put into my body. I'm like, oh, like this scar is not bad enough. Now I have a hockey puck on the side, so now I can't wear bikinis or like whatever. Like I'd wear a bathing suit and not worry about my scar, but now I got this big thing on my side. Like,
Could I just stop you for a second? So one of the frustrations I have as a trainer is I hate whining and bitching from certain clients, and I've been known to fire clients because of that.
I got fired.
If anybody ever bitches and complains about doing lunges or eating more chicken breast than their border broccoli, I'm gonna make them watch your video and be like, listen here.
Right.
You want a problem? Here you go.
Yeah.
It's Daniela. You want some anxiety? Like, this is crazy.
Right.
Whether it happens at a young age or an old age, you want to try to avoid this
Yeah,
at all costs.
yeah.
Nobody wants
You're
to
in a
deal with.
vest and talk about anxiety. You poor thing.
yeah, so.
I don't feel
and
bad for
and
people usually, but
and I'm a
I'm-
little, what's the word? Like, I'm not pretentious, but I'm a little bit, I don't know. In my family, there's like, they're Italian and like they care about how they look, and like having a big scar down my.
Vain.
I'm a little
Vanity.
vain.
Yeah.
I'm a little vain.
Okay.
I mean,
A little vanity is good because it makes you stay fit and healthy, and you would hope
yeah.
you would avoid these things.
Right,
but
right.
yeah,
So-
we're all vain.
Yeah, I
Come
mean,
on.
and so now I can't wear tight like sweaters because this big hockey puck sticks out, and I'm like, anyway, I get this hockey puck put in, and I go 3 years, and I haven't had any issues, and I still work out. I started working out, you know, I lift weights. I told my cardiologist, I'm not going to stop working out. I'll get a trainer so that you could tell him what you want and blah blah blah. And he was my cardiologist is the most humble and smartest man, one of the smartest men I know.
That's great.
And he's all about me getting a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth opinion, as opposed to the first doctor who I don't feel would have done the same for me.
Okay.
So, because when I get a second, third, fourth, and fifth opinion, my cardiologist gets another opinion too, another eyes on my heart, another point of view, right? Like,
If you're intelligent and confident in what
Yeah,
you're doing,
yeah.
you don't fear someone else looking over your work. In fact, you welcome it
Yes.
because maybe you did miss something,
Right.
So
yeah.
But
So-
but ego does come into
With
play with
doctors.
certain doctors,
Yes,
man.
yes.
Oh.
Not with him.
You know,
Not
and when
with him.
you excuse my
That's not
language,
something
I'm
you
gonna
want.
you don't fuck with the heart, man.
No, the heart is such a fragile muscle.
That's
I
it.
didn't think
That's
about
it.
it like
Yeah.
growing up that my heart is a fragile muscle.
Yeah.
I was like, my mom told me to get up from watching cartoons on Saturday morning. Like there was,
Yeah.
you know, there was no downtime
Yes.
growing up.
Yeah, anytime a doctor makes you feel bad about asking questions about your health, you run from that doctor.
Yeah,
You know, there's
yeah.
so many great doctors, but if someone's more invested in their ego
Right.
instead of the patient's health, you run.
Yeah.
Run slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a
I tried.
hockey
I
puck,
tried to
but-
run. I tried to
Yeah,
run the
yeah,
first time, but
yeah.
I didn't win. I
Right.
didn't win. So, so I have this defibrillator. I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to see what happens in the next 3 years. I'm going to be on the medications. I'm going to do all the right things. I'm going to make sure I stay hydrated, but not too hydrated because you can't, you know, you could overhydrate your
Yes,
heart.
you can become hyponatremic, which is low electrolyte, and that can throw off the wiring aspect of a heart and throw you into
and that
either-
comes from being overly hydrated.
Yes. So you have a certain what's called blood volume, and think about like when we were young, we made iced tea, right? You put those scoopers of iced tea in, there was a certain amount of scoops per water, right? And if you put too much water to those scoops, it would be diluted and it would taste weak, right? So you can actually dilute your own blood volume by overhydrating, and you can be deficient in electrolytes. Now, if somebody's watching this, oh, I want more knowledge on that, you just look at your urine. If your urine is ever clear, which some people on the internet advocate for, you're overhydrated. Your electrolytes, you're becoming hypernatremic. And if you push that really far, your brain can swell and push against your skull, and you can have go into a coma and die because there's this tight junction from your brain to your skull. There's not much movement. So yes, you're right that if you're overhydration, and urine is just the way. So anyway, I know we were talking about hearts here, and we'll do a video on this, but what they call straw yellow is a great way for you to know that you're hydrated. And healthy people run into this problem all the time because they're like, I was told to drink a lot of water, so blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know.
Yes.
I was trying to have clear urine for years.
No.
So I tried to, you know, I was like doing all these things, and then 3 years went by, and I was like, I told my doctor, I'm like, listen, I've been 3 years, no events. I want this thing out. I could get hit by a car tomorrow. I'm like, I don't like having this hockey puck in me. I don't think I need it. He's like, all right, let's do some tests and blah, 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 and see how your heart's doing and what your EF is, and we'll take it
So now
from there.
you're saying we're 3 years out from the heart attack you had
From
in the spin
second,
class.
Yes. And I go out of town and I come home on a Sunday, and I didn't drink a lot of water that weekend because I was in a car for 7 hours each way, and I don't want to have to pull over to go to the bathroom, whatever. And it's Monday morning, I go to the rec center to work out, and I just started my workout, so it has nothing to do with my workout.
Okay.
It never does, really. But I was going to do like triceps. I forget. I was setting up my cables, and all of a sudden, I got a burn, like a cigarette burn in my chest. I was like, ow! And And that was it. I was down, right?
Jesus.
And I dropped my water. My water fell. It was right next to me. But nobody noticed it was me because they would never think I screamed. I was too young. I'm like the youngest one in the rec center.
Right.
They were all like old people in there. And so I literally it shocked me right back into rhythm. My defibrillator. Yeah.
Oh my
well, that's a
God.
sign from God that like I'm keeping this thing in as long as
So,
I live.
you know,
And you had already asked to take it out.
Yeah.
You said, I don't need this thing.
Yeah.
I don't want this thing. Get it out. And then boom.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was going to stop you before. Like, at this point, with everything that you dealt with, like, you're a woman, so I'm going to use the term, how do you have the balls to ask a doctor how to pull that out of your body after? I'm a pretty ballsy guy, but how do you, like, have the confidence to, because in your mind, you're like, I want this thing out.
Yeah, because I don't need it.
Do you hate it that much?
I
Is it
hated
that
it. I
uncomfortable that
hated
you're
it.
willing to roll those dice?
I hated it so much, and I didn't think I needed it, right? I thought I was in denial again. Like, I don't need this defibrillator.
Okay. Because
Like,
that sounds crazy to me, Danielle.
yeah. So,
Love you dearly, but that sounds bananas.
Right. So
Take it out. You know what? Take it out.
I'm going to be fine.
I want to look good in a bikini. Just get this thing out. I'm going to be dead in my coffin. I'm not going to have a defibrillator.
But I will look good dead.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
So I got, so fortunately, my cardiologist was like, we're going to do all this test. It wasn't like it was going to happen tomorrow, right? And so then I'm on the ground. I get up. I'm like, shit, I just got shocked by my defibrillator. I call my girlfriend. I'm like, I need you to come pick me up at the rec center. And I was like, I just got shocked. She goes, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine. Just come pick me up. So she picks me up. I call my cardiologist. He's like, come into the office. Let's make sure it was an appropriate shock as opposed to an inappropriate shock. I was hoping it was an inappropriate shock because that would have meant that they're like the levels, however they have it set up, is probably off.
Okay.
But it wasn't. It was appropriate. So I was like, oh, all right. Well, that's not good news. And so I think that's when I said to my doctor, I'm not going to say his name because I can. I love my doctor, but
If you don't love the person that helped you, just be nice and leave their name out. But anybody that you want to give praise to,
yeah,
sure.
Dr. Telrasia, he's the best in the area. So I said, I'm not quitting the gym. I'm not going to stop working out. It's part of my life. Like I can't, that's not living for me if I don't work out.
Right.
I said, I'll get a trainer. That's when I said, I'm going to get a trainer. So I got a trainer. I joined a new gym.
I'm just happy you didn't call me. I'd be like, what? No way, I'm not working
Yeah,
with you.
totally. And that's
That's
the nice
actually-
thing.
that's
I
gotta
mean,
be-
you're cool. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but
I've had
in all
clients that have had
seriousness,
heart
I'm sure
attacks.
as a trainer, that's very stressful.
Yeah.
So it is, it is when anybody, I've dealt with different situations and different problems over the years, and but you kind of get used to it after a while. But yeah, you definitely have to pay attention. A little
There's
bit.
a fine line between pushing somebody too far
Yes.
and keeping them in a place
And then if you
where-
get a maniac like her that, if you throttle back sometimes, you run a trainer. I can see where a trainer maybe, like, especially if the person's hungry to build themselves up financially, where they don't want to struggle with a woman like her that's going to think that they're being underworked, right? So they might make a bad choice of saying, oh, I don't want to lose Daniela as a client. She's a great client. She's going to be loyal. Do I overwork her? Do I underwork her? Because a girl like her, she's not going to like it if somebody pussyfoots around with her, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a tightrope to walk with any sort of serious condition as a trainer.
Right.
And some trainers won't touch it. They won't touch somebody that's. I was only kidding around. I would have worked with you, but but it's a scary. Some trainers just don't want to go down that road, which I respect.
Right. No, he was willing, and he was young, and he played sports in college, and I have to say I'm really grateful for him to have taken me on as a trainer and talk to my cardiologist, because you know what, he's learning too, right, about a patient with a heart condition. So I was working out with him, and I was just about done with my workout, and my girlfriend's behind me, and she knows what happened to me a month before at the rec center. And she looks at me and goes, what are you doing here? I go, I'm working out. My cardiologist knows that I'm working out with a trainer. And I was standing up next to my trainer and next to my girlfriend. And I'm like, I don't feel really good. And I literally fell into my trainer, who's like 6'4". And he took me and put me down on the ground. And I got shocked again.
So that was number 4.
That was number 4. No, wait. Was that 3 or 4? No, that was number 4, right? Twice at Rec Center, one life, in Lit Fitness, and my house was the first one. Yeah, so 4. So so he puts me down. I get shocked back into rhythm again. That time, it didn't feel like a cigarette burn. So one of my biggest fears about having a defibrillator is I was told it feels like a horse is going to kick you. Like when you get shocked.
Oh, the shock.
Yes.
Okay.
That it feels like a horse is kicking you. I'm like, I don't want a horse kicking me in my chest, ever.
Right. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Sounds very unpleasant.
It sounds really worse than dying.
But better than dying.
I don't know.
It's better than dying.
I don't know, Nick. I don't know.
I mean,
I
I guess when you're dead, you don't feel anything,
Yeah.
so maybe.
Yeah,
but
I don't wanna get hit by-
long term,
I don't wanna
I'd
get-
rather be alive and kicked by a horse than toes up.
I don't want to get kicked by a horse. It's not that bad.
Right.
Maybe I have a high threshold for pain,
Right.
but the first time was a cigarette burn, like hit whatever, and the second time was just I don't feel good, and I went down. And then I said, I'll keep this thing forever. And I had it. I just had it changed 2 years ago.
Okay.
So every 6 years, which is not a big deal at all. They changed the battery, not the leads, so they just have to change the battery. And 2 years ago, I wanted a plastic surgeon in the room to do it, to tuck it under the lats, and he did.
Okay.
And so, you felt it, right?
Yeah. So my dad had a heart attack when he was 28. And
God.
And he had electrical problems as well. And I remember as a young child, this is why, as a trainer, I want everybody to look smoking hot. But I will not work with somebody unless they're on board about heart health first. I have this idea that, other than stories like yourself, if you take care of your heart and your health, you'll look great naked as a byproduct of doing the right thing. Because as a young child, I remember laying on my dad, I'd hang with him, and he had this because he had a pacemaker, and I would like play with it, and I just remember this big scar, and it always freaked me out. And my dad was like the strongest guy on planet Earth. He's a Marine or whatever, but I remember that, and I remember how nervous he was, playing with that box and feeling it. And that's so weird, Dad. You must be walking around. He said, I'm
Tough.
yeah, made out of steel. And
Right.
you want to hear how crazy my dad was, just real quick? There's a battery in there. My dad would go, the battery would have to be changed. He'd go like 8 or 9 years without getting the battery changed. I'm like you. Maybe you guys were like, knew each other. He's like, fuck it. I'm like, what? You need to go get the battery changed. Right. It's not gonna work. It's like you're even worse than my dad. You're like, take it out. Forget the battery. Just take it out, please.
Totally. The stars align sometimes, and I'm like, if I didn't have my heart condition, I would not be paying attention to the little things, right?
Right.
I feel like there's a reason that people are in my life. Like I have a really great lifeboat, and if I didn't have my heart issues, I wouldn't pay attention to half the stuff. I wouldn't have slowed down my life. I've slowed down a lot. I mean, even though you might not believe that, right? Because
No, I believe it. I can tell.
I've slowed down.
Still might be faster than the average
Yes.
person.
Yeah, you're real.
But in terms of where you were, you
Yep.
slowed it down a little bit. It gave you
yeah.
a perspective that you might not have.
Correct.
You just told us about the 4th time that you had an incident.
Right.
But since then,
Yeah.
you've been good.
Yeah, so
Have you changed anything in terms of your diet or workout routine or general lifestyle, stress levels maybe,
Right.
that has given you, a better quality of life or lowered the chances of this happening again?
I've learned how to deal with stress a lot better, but I also don't put too much on my plate. And I don't feel guilty about it. Like when people ask me to volunteer at like a kid's school, I don't volunteer my time. I don't do anything for free anymore.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not. Like I do a little bit, but really.
You're being realistic about your own bandwidth.
Correct.
You're doing what you can without overextending yourself in a way that
Right.
is bad for your health.
Correct. It's bad for anyone's health. Like the people that are watching this, like have to recognize our lives have gotten so much more stressful than 40 years ago. Unfortunately, COVID was a good thing. We got to stay home. And we had a good excuse to stay home.
I say it all the time. On a micro level, COVID was really good.
Yeah.
Because I was able to reconnect with my son and my wife in a way that I just would never have been able to do when I was working 70 hours a week before that. Now, of course, on a macro level, things got really bad. Many people died. I had people in my family who passed away.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm sure everybody knows somebody who had a major, major problem with COVID. So, there's a lot going on there, but if you focused in on family, if you spent time with your loved ones during that time, you were given a gift. I was given a gift.
Yeah.
I got to spend time with my son at a critical age, and we have a much better relationship now because of all that time we spent together.
Yeah,
So I agree with you
yes.
there.
So there was something to be said about that. Now we're back to running this rat race in this country, especially. Like, my parents are from Italy. Like, they come to this country for the American dream. And then all they did was work.
Yeah.
And I worked because that's what I saw. But I don't think I worked smart. I think I worked hard.
You're a grinder. You're a grinder,
Yeah.
and sometimes you could just grind too hard.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's where I'm like.
And unfortunately, technology has not made that better for us. It's made it worse, right? If,
Yes.
20, 30 years ago, the expectation level, if someone called you up, you could call them the next day or 2 days later,
Right.
and they didn't think anything was wrong with that. Now, if someone calls you or emails you and you don't respond within 5 minutes, they think something's wrong.
Yep.
You
Right.
hate them, you're dead, something terrible
Right.
happened. So the expectation level is that you're always on top of the 700 people or things that want your attention at that moment. It's really stressful.
Yeah.
Really
And stress is a number, like, they don't talk, like, I don't think doctors are talking about stress to their patients. They don't have time. Doctors don't have time to talk to their patients about their health, really, right? They have like 15 minutes. They're under a lot of stress.
I think
like you said,
a big piece of it, and I think something that you have, and that I know I have, and you have, you need something outside of work and outside of family that you just forget about everything, even if
Right.
it's for an hour,
Right.
2 hours, a couple hours a week, and it just gives you that moment to decompress, right? Whether it's working out, exercise, walking, a dog, a cat, an
Yeah.
animal, something.
watching the sunset.
Something.
Yeah, anything.
You need it.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to leave people with a couple things. One from you, what are some signs and symptoms that people should be looking for, even if they aren't the regular candidate for heart disease or for a heart attack, just so people know, oh, I do feel that, I should go see a doctor?
Right. So obviously we got some from Daniela today, and she didn't think there was anything wrong. So one of the doctors I train, Carrie Levine, will be interviewing him.
I know. I called on him. I'm sorry. I called on him when I was in Long Island.
Small world, see?
Yeah.
He had told me once, Mike, if you or anybody your client ever gets a headache that just feels like a different headache, and this guy is like the furthest thing from an alarmist, right? You go right to the hospital. If it's a headache that just feels different, right? So what Daniela said, she still can't articulate why she felt weird that day when she was driving. So if you have that, boom, you might waste your day, but you would rather waste your day in the ER and say nothing's wrong with your kiddo, which, as we learned, may not even be the situation. So I would say right there, if you have a weird feeling that just doesn't seem right, you get this, because a lot of times they say that you get a weird sixth sense that you're gonna have a heart attack. So that dizziness that just keeps on happening intermittently, obviously chest tightness, jaw pain, and just feeling overall exhausted, irregular heartbeats where it's like bump, 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 bump. That could be, there's a lot of, but those are like right off the top.
Basically, don't play games. If you don't feel right, get yourself checked out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You
Listen
don't
to
mess
your
with
body.
the heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but those are like, there's a lot of different symptoms, but those things can be other things. You could have
course.
ate bad, food.
Hopefully
or,
it's gas.
Well,
or
sometimes women get
Yes.
indigestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's really, they're having a heart attack.
Yeah, it could be reflux. It can be anything. But you know what? Better safe than sorry,
Right.
because you don't mess with your health in general, but
Right.
the heart is.
Yeah.
And so, Daniela, what's your message to people who say, I'm fit, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't need to get this stuff checked out?
Listen to your body and get it checked. Like, if there's something that's off, even a little off, why not go to the ER and get checked? And I don't, go to the ER can be scary today too, right? But there's tests that can be done that are non-invasive. You could get an echocardiogram. It's just like kind of like an ultrasound of your heart to see if there's any blockages. A cath is not always invasive, right? Like especially when it's scheduled. If you're really having chest pain or whatever, the cardiologist is going to recommend it, but it's usually in their office. It's not necessarily, and my situation was a little different. What else? Talk to people about it. Don't keep, like I was so private that I didn't want anyone to know that I was having this weird thing happening, right? I just told one person at the gym, but I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. What else?
Like, simple blood work. A lot of people, Nick, they'll come to me,
Yeah.
and I'm like, when's the last time you had blood? They're like, God, I really should go. I'm like, well, when's the last time? They're like, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm like, what?
Right.
What is the matter with you? So there's just specific blood markers that can be off that
At
can
least
indicate.
once a year, people should be going out, getting that blood work done.
Absolutely. I always say the blood is the river of life, and it tells you a whole
Yeah.
story. I go every 6 months. Through my wife, I have great medical insurance, so I'm blessed that way. But I want to keep score, man.
Yeah,
and
me
that's
too.
the easiest
You want
way.
You want a
blood work.
baseline. You want a baseline too,
Yeah.
so you could compare.
Yeah.
I did get involved recently also in women's heart disease. Go Red for Women. It's like within the American Heart Association, and Go Red for Women is really focusing on women's hearts. So like Valentine's Day, I'll be in a fashion show in Virginia. Telling my story probably again,
And like you said, it's so important because you do hear a lot about breast cancer. You don't hear a lot about heart health for women.
Right.
And it's a huge killer.
Yeah.
Number one.
Every 33 seconds.
Yep. Sick.
Crazy.
All right.
Well, let's wrap it up there. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out to tell your story. It's such an important piece of your life that you were sharing with us, and hopefully it's going to impact the viewers' lives
I hope
as well.
so too. Thanks for having me.
And hopefully you'll agree to come back sometime, because I feel like there's so much more to ask you about this, and I want to hear about the recovery as well.
See, Nick's so nice. Hopefully you're definitely coming back.
I'm definitely coming back.
We're going to tell the rest of it. We're going to talk about what you're doing currently.
Right.
You said that you had maybe some recent diagnosis and stuff like that, so you could go over that. And we'll unpack a lot of different stuff that I'm sure we didn't get to today. But thanks for sharing it with us, man.
It's been great. I'm glad I got to share it.
It was fun. Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks so
A
much.
heavy story, but a lot of fun. And thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.
Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any videos in the future.